Don't look at the third-floor window. When Mark moved into his new apartment, the landlord gave him only one warning: never look at the third-floor window after midnight. The way he said it was casual, as if it were just a harmless superstition, but something about his tone unsettled Mark. He laughed it off, assuming it was an old joke among the tenants. The rent was cheap and the place was decent. He wasn't going to let some strange warning ruin it for him. The apartment itself was nothing special. A small living room, a compact kitchen, and a bedroom with a window that faced the street. The building had 4 floors, but the third floor had always seemed oddly quiet. In the weeks since he moved in, Mark had never seen anyone coming in or out of those apartments. No lights, no movement, nothing. It was like the entire floor was abandoned. By the second week, curiosity started creeping in. Every night at exactly midnight, Mark would hear something faint like shuffling footsteps, but not in the hallway. The sound came from above, from the third floor. Sometimes it was quick, like someone pacing. Other times it was slow, almost hesitant. One night he asked his neighbor, an old woman who lived on the second floor, if she knew anything about the third floor. She just shook her head and muttered, "If you hear them walking, just ignore it." That only made him more curious. That Friday night, Mark stayed up late, scrolling through his phone, trying to ignore the strange noises above. At exactly midnight, he heard it again. The slow, dragging footsteps. His body tensed as the sound moved this time. It wasn't just above him. It was moving toward the window. His heart pounded as he stared at his own window, knowing the third floor had a window directly above his. The landlord's warning echoed in his head. He wasn't supposed to look, but that only made him want to look even more. With a slow, deliberate motion, he tilted his head up. His window faced the street, and so did the one above. From this angle, he could only see the bottom edge of the third-floor window frame. At first, there was nothing, just darkness. Then movement. A shadow shifted behind the glass. Not just a silhouette, but something wrong, The shape was too familiar. It was standing still. The moment his eyes locked onto it, his stomach turned to ice. It was him. His own face stared down at him from the third-floor window. But something was off. His reflection, if that's what it was, wasn't copying his expression. It wasn't mirroring him. It was simply watching. Mark's breath hitched. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure in the window had his face, his hair, his eyes, but they weren't blinking. They weren't moving. Then the mouth twitched. The thing in the window grinned.
Mark stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair. His hands shook as he ripped the curtains closed. His chest heaving. His own reflection had smiled at him, but he hadn't smiled. The apartment felt suffocating. Every noise, every creak in the walls sent shivers down his spine. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the grin. By morning, he convinced himself it was exhaustion. Maybe a trick of the light. Maybe his mind playing games with him. But deep down, he knew better. The next night, he forced himself not to look. Midnight came. The footsteps started. He kept his eyes on his phone, pretending not to hear. Then his phone buzzed. A notification. Someone had sent him a photo. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the screen. The photo was taken from inside his room. It showed him, sitting exactly where he was, staring at his phone, but he hadn't taken it. A cold dread crawled up his spine. Slowly, he turned his head toward the window. The curtains were still shut, but somehow, he knew, something was standing behind them, watching. He didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, he packed his bags. He didn't bother waiting for the landlord. He didn't bother explaining. He just left. As he walked down the street, he made the mistake of glancing up at the building one last time. The third-floor window was open now, and his own face was still there, still grinning. And then it waved.